everyone.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Senate Education, Tuesday, May 3rd, 1:58 in the afternoon. Before we get started on S100, let's just give a quick overview of where things stand. Looks like the House is moving forward with S283 on the floor today. That's our miscellaneous education bill. We'll wait and have a walkthrough on that. Probably, Daphne, why don't we do that tomorrow? Walkthrough of 283. We'll also see what they do on, I believe it's S138 or 139. That's the mascot bill, which the House concurred with. The committee concurred on, and we'll see what the full floor does. We are also looking at S727, which will be on the floor tomorrow. We didn't need to pass over it, given that we didn't get to it, but we wanted to give government operations an opportunity to hear from Will Senning on the governance piece, and we do have an amendment. Senator Perswick and I met with Senator Hardy this weekend, and she has an amendment for her district, which we can talk about when she arrives. I did spend time with the pro tem and money chairs on again, off again this weekend. I think we are going, I think there's money to do certainly PCBs. I think there's also money to do meals. The question is there a way to do meals that if people want to do meals, do it in a long-term way? I should also be clear that I have not heard this directly from the governor himself, but I'm hearing that the governor is not particularly interested in PCB money, nor is he particularly interested in meals. I don't know if that means both breakfast and lunch. If he would just sign a bill with breakfast, I don't know. I'll leave that to the pro tem's office to come back to us and have a conversation with him on it. I don't think anybody wants to lose all of it. I don't know if it's possible to lose some, anyhow, that's sort of where I think some of the things are sort of flying around as it relates to this committee. All I mentioned before, Senator Perswick came in, was that the House had S283 on the floor today. That's our miscellaneous education bill. And they pushed back PCBs, or they were kind of giving more time, and that might be an issue that we want to respond to in that bill. They also have a mascot bill on the floor today. And I think you were here when I said 727 is on the floor tomorrow, and you and I will present that. Any questions about where things stand at this point? Yes.
Do you know what the vote was for S100 on the floor now?
That's a great question. It was last week. I'm looking over to Ms. Horton. Do you happen to know the House?
They did not do a roll call.
They didn't do a roll call. Okay.
We were asking it.
Yeah, I thought it was voice.
Okay. Okay. So the other question, yeah, is could some of these things, could PCBs, something with meals, the tax break, could it all go, and would we be able to override all this? That's a really great question. And I don't raise all these things in any way to damper committee's expectations or anything. It's just nor do I feel like we have to work and be fearful of the vote, but we'll just do our best work. With that, before let's get started on S100 to hear from Jay Nichols and Mr. Jeffrey Francis. I feel like I haven't seen you guys in ages. Mr. Nichols, we'll start with you. As you know, the bill expands universal breakfast to breakfast and lunch. I think there are a number of different things on the table, ways to look at it. We could do just breakfast. We could do breakfast and lunch. I think there's, I think generally what people would like, I think is if we were to move to breakfast and lunch, that this would be an ongoing program, not to use one-time funds to sort of cover just a year, but that's also a possibility. I mean, that is also in the realm of possibility. So I guess if I'm asking you for where do you fall, it's universal breakfast, and lunch, or some variation of what I just outlined as other options.
Yeah, if it's okay with you, I'll share 3 or 4 minutes worth of comments. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the VPA fully supports the importance of school meals and the positive impact these meals have on students' physical, social, emotional, and academic well-being. There's a wealth of research that supports the benefits, and it's clear it really helps to reduce social stigmas of an economic nature in our schools for the students involved. We signed on to a letter with our 2 principal national affiliate groups asking the U.S. Congress to provide free universal meals for breakfast and lunch to all students in schools receiving public funds. And as you know, that provision did not make it through the appropriations process. Recently, there's been some talk in the U.S. Congress at the federal level of trying to revive a plan to provide universal free meals to students. And our congressional delegation has been involved in those conversations, and we're supportive of that. I do want to mention that we noticed in testimony earlier this session in health education from witnesses in Maine that Maine has enacted a law providing free breakfast and lunch. We also noticed that the funds necessary for this in Maine came from the general fund there. Additionally, we've noticed since then that most advocates in Vermont that are advocating for free meals beginning at the start of next school year, almost to a person have requested that come from the education fund. So one point that I really want to stress, and I do have this in writing and I will send to you afterwards to Daphne, when we increase the education fund absent a non-property tax revenue source, we are increasing property taxes for Vermonters. And we just need to be clear about that. And also, we're also opening ourselves up to the same old rhetoric that Vermont spends too much money per pupil on public education. And if this is true, perhaps it's because we keep adding items to the education fund that are of greater social interest and probably should be paid for out of the general fund. People seem to see the education fund as this great nebulous fund out there to just keep adding things to. The problem with that is that schools are then often beat up with comments of spending too much. And by way of example, just a couple examples, but not limited to, need mental health counselors in schools. Schools hire them as employees and pay for it out of the education fund. Concerned about lead in schools, let local school districts pay for it. Again, a draw on the education fund. PCBs with potential, I apologize for my phone. And I apologize to the person I just hung up on too. PCBs with a potential of tens and perhaps hundreds of millions of dollars that may be needed for mitigation. Right now, there's no absolute final financial plan approved, but again, it's looking more and more like that would be an education fund issue and expense. And then lastly, early childhood care, not in schools. You require the daycare to have rules not nearly as stringent as public schools. Give each parent a stipend for early childhood education of 10 hours a week paid for out of the ed fund, which I think is a great idea for parents without resources. We also pay for those hours for parents that are financially well-resourced. And again, it serves as another drag on the ed fund. Several years ago, a previous Secretary of Education, Rebecca Holcomb, when she was Commissioner of Education and allowed latitude as a commissioner, not directly working for the administration, estimated, if I remember correctly, that about 77% of education funds could legitimately be categorized as the responsibility of school districts, while the other 23% were at least questionable. That rate's not the same in every state. This doesn't mean these things are not important, just that they come at a cost, and we should at least be mindful that perhaps that cost is more aligned with state responsibility as opposed to school district responsibility. I realize the plan is to continue this program that has been federally funded throughout the pandemic, potentially at Vermont's expense, with a surplus in the education fund this year. The VPA doesn't have a major problem with that, other than to say we are always a little skeptical when it comes to one-time funds being used to support what looks to be an ongoing obligation. Unfortunately, school administrators and school boards often don't have that luxury. They have to make a decision. And if this comes out in a way where that's added to the local tax rates, it could cause schools to have to cut other things. So we have to make the hard choices. Any reoccurring costs of the ed fund will mean additional strain on that fund that will be felt in schools and will, at least in some cases, take decision-making authority away from school boards and school administrators unless we take steps to make sure that doesn't happen. And by we, I really mean you. Thus, if we're going to do this after next year, we should look at some additional funding revenue source to support the education fund specifically for this purpose, or look at the general fund, since this is a general societal concern at least as much as it is an education concern. And that's really what I have for prepared comments, Chair Campion.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Any questions for Mr. Nichols? Mr. Persler.
Jay, would the association's position change at all if we switch to an income-based education fund, our education fund based on income instead of property tax, so we don't have that connection to property tax and people feeling like voting for the school budget is going to cause their property tax to go up correctly?
No, I'd have to, I'd have to think about that. We've never talked about that as an executive council. We have talked about switching over to what it might look like to switch over to an income tax model, but I need a lot more details to really know. If it's still going to be something where when locals vote on budgets, they're thinking about their local budget in a way that would be, geez, if we feed all the kids, we can't have the new reading teacher or whatever it might be. Then I think those concerns might still be the same, but it's a great question. I really wish I had a better answer for you, Senator Birchlight.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Mr. Nichols, what are principals seeing on the ground as it relates to kids who are coming to school hungry, are leaving hungry? Give us a sense also of what principals might be seeing as it relates to one of the things that bothered me last week in the testimony was that we have kids and families out there that are getting phone calls that they have meal debt, that and then of course that's embarrassing. People don't call back. We don't want people to feel that way. Can you tell us what principals see on the ground as it relates to hunger?
Yeah, so we haven't seen that the last couple of years because it's all been paid for through the federal government.
Right.
Prior to that, though, that was a legitimate issue, and advocates from places like Hunger Free Vermont and stuff are absolutely right that is a legitimate issue. It's a national issue, and oftentimes it affects. I don't know what the right term would be, but those students that are just above qualifying maybe for free and reduced lunch, and their parents are really having a tough economic time but don't quite qualify for. So from principal's perspective, feeding all the kids, there's lots of advantages to it, but it's a policy decision. What they don't want to do is be in a situation where all the kids get fed and they can't hire an extra math teacher if they need it, which is why we push for the idea of a dedicated funding source specifically for that program. The value of the program, I don't think you're going to see a single member of mine say that the program is not, and that they have not seen some really good things because of it in terms of less stigmatizing of students and those types of things.
So Jay, I really agree with a lot of your stance, and I want to have these free meals available to kids, and I to do everything you described. Where I keep stubbing my toe on is how to fund it. And you mentioned how Maine is using the general fund and not the ed fund. Do you know of other examples here in Vermont where we are funding things in our schools out of the general fund? Or do you know of other states that similarly have creative mechanisms? I would love to institute a liquor tax. I would love to put an additional tax on liquor to pay for school meals. I'm just curious if you have other ideas on funding sources outside of the ed fund that could rationally support and arguably support the universal meals.
Yeah, I apologize for laughing in the middle of your thing. I thought you said a liver tax. I was like, that's not going to make any money. Nobody's buying liver.
He did say liver.
Yeah. I thought he said liver.
All the liver goes to school and then cash it on the way.
Nobody would eat school lunch if we had nothing but liver.
Lunch.
So I think looking at some type of a sin tax might be the way to go. I've always felt that way. The problem with that is they often end up being regressive tax. So you can make the argument that you might be hurting let's say you put extra tax on, I don't know, potato chips and soda, you might be hurting the families you least want to hurt, because that might be something they can easily get, so you have to think through those models too. I think in Vermont, the bigger problem is we seem to have our education system serving as a major part of our social network, including financially, to provide kids support and mental health and things like that. And I'm not saying that schools shouldn't do that. If we choose to do that, then that's fine. We just need to acknowledge that. In terms of specific things, Senator Chittenden, I don't have anything real specific. I would like to see the legislature try to figure that out and say, all right, these things right here, whether it's a 3-cent tax on soda and a 1-cent tax on this or whatever. I just think that if you're going to do it, it should be something where you don't inadvertently put taxpayers in a position where they're likely to vote down a school budget because they're frustrated about their taxes going up. And the only thing the school can control is programs that they run. They wouldn't be able to control this because it wouldn't be required.
Yes, Senator Chip.
Just as a quick follow-up, I completely concur. I would hate to have a mandate for food and then put school districts in the place where they have to cut French or Russian or German just so that they can feed kids that otherwise have the means to do so. So that is another concern I have.
Agreed.
Senator Hooker.
I was gonna ask the question about, dedicated funds and what you would recommend, but you talked about syntaxes and about the legislature coming up with those particular things. And to Senator Chittenden's point about paying for people who can afford it, what are your thoughts on that?
It bothers me. It bothers me in Act 166. We're subsidizing people with extra money, but I understand the rationale behind it here. I mean, because it takes away the whole worry about no matter where you make the line, there's going to be some kids and families are going to fall under the line, and they may have some things going on that their gross household income doesn't really address. It might be going on that we don't know about, that they might be dealing with, and might put them in a position where it's really hard. And it is very hard for schools to collect the money. It does set up adversarial relationships sometimes between school officials that are, I mean, when I was elementary principal, my wife and I used to pay kids lunch bills all the time, just because we didn't want to have to deal with it and didn't want the school to have to try to charge them. And I know there's plenty of teachers and principals and school lunch program people that do that stuff all the time.
I think what's been talked about a lot in this committee, and I think also on the streets, is how is there a way to carve out wealthy families from this? And part of the governor's message continues to be, we don't want to be paying for subsidizing wealthy families, whether it's for breakfast or lunch. The problem there, as I'm finding, is all of this is connected to federal match programs. So it's not as though, and I would look to maybe greater experts on this, but I don't think there are ways to do that then allows us to get the matches that we would need to get. If, for example, we were to say, and also I've got to be honest, from a bureaucratic standpoint, if you're making 150,000 or more, I'm still not sure how you kind of carve those folks out. So it's the match piece and the bureaucratic piece. Senator Pertwee.
I thought I heard Senator Chittenden ask a question if you knew of any example where the general fund or the general fund is supporting education. Is there any example of where the general fund is supporting anything in a school or education?
In Vermont?
Yeah, in Vermont.
The lottery funds. The lottery funds.
No, not income, but is there
No,
something?
Yeah, I don't think there is. I don't think there is, Senator Pertwee, in the way that you're saying. I mean, Jeff Rance has been along longer than me. He may know of something, but I really don't think that there is.
Would you repeat? So
That's what Maine.
Wasn't that your, didn't ask your, that was the
Yeah.
question, because Maine is doing
Maine
that.
is
They're taking general fund supporting meals, which
Right.
I get your point about whether it's education or not, but it's in the schools. What I heard his question was, is there any example of that in Vermont? And I think what your answer is no, there isn't an example.
Not that I know of.
okay,
Lottery feeds into the ed fund.
yeah,
which is
sure,
different.
sure, which is totally different. Yeah.
This is a like a
Right, this
general
isn't a
fund
fund.
covering an education fund or a school-based expense.
Yeah, Senator Chittinden.
Let's get sports betting back in the mix and have that fund universal meals. How do we do that?
What about only high school? You can only bet on high school.
Only if you're 18 or.
Senator. Thank you for this, Mr. Nichols. If you don't mind sticking around a little bit, that'd be great.
Yeah, I will.
Mr. Francis, good to see you.
Nice to see you. Hello, everyone. Is my audio working okay?
Yes.
Great. Thanks for the opportunity to talk with you. Much of my thinking is consistent with what Mr. Nichols and the committee has spoken about. We've been paying attention to both S100 and the issue of PCB remediation since the outset of the session. I know that I've communicated with you, particularly around PCBs, and I wanted to start by thanking the committee chair and the committee in general for what I think is your current disposition on PCBs, irrespective of what the governor might be saying. For the Superintendent's Association, I think out of need and necessity,
Our
our highest priority is on making sure that there's sufficient money available for PCB remediation. With regard to meals, my thinking is quite similar to Mr. Nichols in that the Superintendent's Association are persuaded about the compelling nature of an effort to make sure that food is available to students in schools. And I've paid close attention to the testimony of the many advocates who you've heard from on that topic. And as Mr. Nichols indicated, I would be hard pressed to find a superintendent. In fact, I don't think I could find a superintendent who had concerns about or wasn't supportive of making sure that students had food, including universally available food. I think the rub comes in when that initiative is put into competition for money or put into competition with other compelling needs. And, you know, we've found ourselves in a position through these deliberations where it's PCB remediation, universal meals, references to career and technical education, property tax relief, and so on and so forth. So in terms of the prioritization, we put remediation of PCBs first. And with regard to universal school meals, we don't object whatsoever to utilization of FY23 resources to the program, although when you hit 2024, our preference would not to see it added to the education property tax. And by definition, as you've already covered, that means there needs to be a source of money. And I think that there's some hope that that the feds will come through. I think there's some hope that through the administration of the program, the cost will decline from the $29 million estimate that you're currently facing. And I would be hopeful on both of those fronts as well. But when all is said and done, if those monies don't materialize, then the General Assembly will have a policy decision to make. And that is, should we continue to provide universal school meals at a cost of $29 million, which is additive. It does contribute to the cost per pupil that Mr. Nichols was speaking about. So it's a policy decision, as he indicated. So those are my thoughts currently. I'd be happy to answer any questions with respect to anything that I've said or anything else on the topic that I might not have covered.
Thank you. Senator Lyons.
Thank you very much. When the House was considering this, and I think you were probably following it as much as anyone, you and Jay both, did the House look at alternative payments? I heard discussion about sugary drinks tax or candy tax. Was there any printout or data that they collected? I was trying to look it up on the webpage, but I didn't see anything there. I was wondering if either you or Jay knew if that had been sort of scoped out in the process.
They did talk about it. I don't recall what the estimated revenues were. Graham from the Joint Fiscal Office came in and spoke about it. I think, and Ms. Horton may recall this because she was in the committee as well. I think that they moved that, they didn't move forward with that specific revenue source because I think it was considered, at least for the time being, at least, to be a non-starter. But I think, you know, my view is that that in FY24 we'll be right back in that place. You know, for those of you who understand, and I think you all do, the journey that S100 had, the first thing that the education associations did was object to the notion that came out of the Senate Ag Committee that it could just be added to local school districts. So that moved the conversation to the education fund. We got a reprieve with the federal money because, as you all know, S100 just had breakfast, and then we were moving toward phasing in universal lunch. I think effective fiscal year 26. There was a task force that was convened on where the money would come to do that. And then, because I believe the benefits of 2+ years of universal meals supported by the federal government, we gained experience with that. It became, let's not let this program fall away. All of that is very understandable to me. And I work with superintendents who have to balance budgets at the local level. And as Mr. Nichols pointed out, every new thing that school districts are asked to do that doesn't come with monetary support is additive. And whether it manifests itself in a local budget number and cost, or whether it gets added to the statewide education property tax rate, it still gets added.
For what it's worth, I did hear that the numbers were pretty low on those taxes.
Yeah, I have a bill in on the candy
Yeah.
sales tax, and it was under 5 million. I want to say it was even like 3 million or something. It wasn't that much.
Ms. Horton, may I turn to you for one moment? Please, just feel free to introduce yourself from there, but one quick question.
Ruth Hardy.
Thank you for that.
It was a deal that we have that I'm going to do that every time.
Senator Stitt and I are going to step out in the hall. Ms. Horton, it has been said that, and I'm looking to you to help clarify this, that unless it's breakfast and lunch, your organization, or it's been said the advocates, don't want to move forward. Is that accurate?
I know Horton.
Thank you. You don't have to answer this right now. I don't want to put you on the
So I'm
spot.
not going to answer that question.
Okay.
On behalf of everybody who's advocating for this bill.
Sure.
It goes far beyond
Just you.
the
Sure.
organization that I
It's fair.
am accountable for. What we are confronting right now, which is just different than when S100 was first created and first moving through the Senate, is that the experience is going to be, if we don't continue with universal breakfast and lunch, taking food away from students and families who are depending on it now and really can't afford not to have it. So that is the issue that is confronting your committee at this time. And so I'll just say that.
That's helpful.
And that I understand it's this is a 1-year plan, and everybody's having the goal in mind of finding a way to continue it. And we will have to work on finding a way to, make that work. But next year is a critical year.
Thank you. And again, I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that. It was
Perfectly
just something
fine,
that
put
was.
me on, go ahead.
Okay.
Surprise on the spot.
Any other questions for Mr. Francis at this point, or Mr. Nichols while we have them? Seeing none, we are going, thank you both very much. We may have you back. Mr. Francis, final words?
Yeah, final. Thank you very much. If I heard you correctly, Senator Campion, at the beginning of the session, you indicated that Governor Scott may not be supportive of PCB money. That is confounding to me, because at a time when we want to keep kids in school, and we know that the discovery of actionable levels of PCBs is going to throw school districts into a relative upheaval, even if there is money available. It's confounding to me how anybody would object to making sure funds were available to deal with PCB remediation. So I think I heard you correctly. I wish that I had not, but I want to thank the committee for its work on both these issues, PCBs and universal school meals.
Thank you, Mr. Francis, and I appreciate your comments. We did, as I recall, hear that also directly from the Agency of Education, Secretary French, but I'm going to ask Daphne to have Secretary French in tomorrow to confirm that PCB position. Senator Chittenden.
That too would very much confound me because this $90 million is from the ed fund from taxpayers, and it's the PCBs is really deferred maintenance. So this is the most logical place to put the money, in my humble opinion. So I share in your confoundedness if that is in fact the position.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you both very much. Committee, let's shift in this one. We're going to probably come back to this discussion a little bit if you want to stick around. Committee, let's shift back to H727. Senator Hardy, please feel free to join us at the table. As I mentioned, I believe in the beginning, Senator Hardy has an amendment. I'm going to pass that around.
Healthy ones.
Healthy and
Oh, somebody called these adult fruit roll-ups.
They're so good.
Yeah,
No sugar added. Well,
I'll take one when I leave. If I leave, you guys allow me to.
Right.
Your old chair, I think.
Senator Persick, we've heard quite a bit now from you since Senator Hardy walked in. No, so
Wait, is Beth in here? Can we get
he
Beth
is
in?
remote.
Oh,
he is
Beth
right
is
there.
remote. Hi, Beth.
H727, as you know, we've been working on it now for a while. You represent a number of towns that are represented in this work. And we understand that you have a proposal amendment. So the floor is
Yeah,
yours.
thank you, Mr. Chair. I almost called you Madam Chair.
Okay.
As you know, this has been a crazy hard bill, and I really appreciate all the work this committee has done. And I'm sorry to come in at the last minute with an amendment. And this has been a difficult bill for me too, because I represent the 3 of the towns that are directly impacted, but all of my towns are indirectly impacted because, as you know, when one town decides to leave a district, it impacts all of the rest of the towns in the district as well. So it's been a tough bill for me because I'm hearing conflicting things from my constituents, and I know you all have been there before in that vote. And I know that you heard a lot from the town of Starksboro in particular, and their desire to have some kind of carve out because they have scheduled a vote to withdraw from the Mount Airy School District. I believe it's next week for the first of their votes, and they have scheduled.
15th, yeah,
I think it's the 10th. But anyway, soon, and they started that process before this bill came up. So I appreciate that you did some work for them. And that's the town that I primarily heard from until the bill passed out of your committee. And then I started over the weekend hearing from the other 2 towns, and they weren't happy with what was in the bill. So this amendment is an attempt to stay within the parameters of the bill that you passed. I've talked extensively to the chair, probably more than he wants me to talk to him about this.
Not true.
Well,
yes, it is.
Yeah, it is. And also to the senator from Washington as well about it. And so I was asked to stay within the parameters of your bill, and I tried to do that. So this is the first time I'm seeing the amendment. So I will walk you through what I think is in the amendment. And Beth, if I'm mistaken on anything, please chime in.
And Senator Hooker, it's completely, Senator Hooker, I'm sorry, Senator Hooker, it's completely up to you. If you want to give us broad strokes, and then we can have Ledge Council, whatever works for you.
I'll give you broad strokes.
Okay.
What the intent was to basically just give the 3 towns a little bit more time. My understanding is that they are hoping to work together to form a new supervisory union. They are all at slightly different stages, with Ripton being the first one out of the gate, then Lincoln, and then Starksboro being third. And so the intent of this is to stick within the parameters that you all established in the bill, but to give each of the towns a little bit more time. So
And Senator Hardy, I'm sorry to interrupt, but while we're on this, more time exactly to do what?
to do,
Together.
excuse me. So, my understanding of what your bill does in each of these sections. So for section 4, which is the Ripton section, they would have to report to the board, the State Board of Education this summer. And if they are deemed prepared, they could go forward. If they're deemed unprepared, they would be told they need to go back to the school district from once they came. And so that my amendment would have that, would give them another year before they were told to go back. So that they would report to the state board this summer. If the state board says that they're deemed prepared, then things would just carry on as normal or as, you know, they planned. If they're deemed unprepared, they would get another year to prepare and essentially wait for Lincoln and Starksboro to also prepare. And then hopefully next year they would be prepared to move forward, or if they're not, then they would be told to get back into the ACSD, Addison Central School District. So that's what, and I think that, I believe Beth included a provision about they would have to hold some meetings, public meetings about it over the next year. So that's for Ripton. For Lincoln, it's a similar proposal that they would report to the state board this summer. If they're deemed prepared, things would move forward. If they're not, they would get another year. The difference for Lincoln is because they are slightly behind Ripton in terms of the process, they don't have a school board yet. So I thought it was important that they actually have a school board if they're going to have another year. So there's a provision that would allow them to go forward with creating a school board. And then
So would the year begin after the school board is instituted, or does the year after they were?
It goes until July 1st of 2023. So it's basically just I think your bills have them, your bill has them reporting July 1st of 2022.
Right.
And this would stick with that, but then it would give them another report next year. And then they would have to go back to Mount Abe if they're not ready. But in the interim, if they could elect a school board, so there's some public body that's in charge of things, not just a crew of people who care but aren't publicly elected. And then for Starksboro, the only thing that's different for between yours and this amendment is that it would give them 90 days instead of 30 days between when they reported to when they passed their vote and when they would have to report to the board, just to give them a little more time to get their report together. So that is the proposal. It's an attempt to come to some kind of middle ground. I know that when I first heard from all the towns, they were upset with what had happened in the House.
Right.
And they didn't really love the House stuff. And then I think now they want to go back to what the House did. So this is trying to stick with your parameters, but to give them more time to get their ducks in a row. I know you all understand the awkward position I'm in, and I appreciate you hearing me out.
Absolutely. Senator Purcell.
So the way it looks like they kind of have two bites at the apple. Like they make a proposal. If it's deemed that they're unlikely, they just kind of wait a year and start all over. Do the same thing that they would do this summer, next summer.
Yeah.
And then the board has to review it the same way, come up with a likely, unlikely again. And then at that point, there would be done.
Right.
Why not allow them, just to save all the work, if it's possible? I mean, I guess there's a chance that it'll be likely. It seemed like, people felt like that they were not going to be, it was going to be unlikely that they'd be ready. But maybe I'm wrong on that. But just having them decide the summer instead of writing a report and then having the boards making the determination that this summer they can just say, we want another year. Instead of going through the process to see if they're likely or unlikely now, if they're really serious about doing this new SU with the other two towns, saying, we want, they could take this off ramp, they could go through the process, or they could go for an extra year.
That's a thought. Sure.
So I'm just trying to make it.
If that makes it cleaner, mostly, my goal is to try to give them a little extra time.
Yeah.
Because I think that you're right. I think that Ripton all on its own it's unlikely that they're going to be deemed prepared on their own. But if they are able to sort of match up with Lincoln and Starksboro, I think that makes the likelihood more possible. And that could be a viable supervisory union with those three schools. So I think that your proposal would do that. I would.
Because what we heard from both the board and the agency is that the tight timeline to get the report in July and then do their process, hold meetings, issue this, and then, by a time that's good in the fall. So if Red Ripton says, you know what, we just want to push our, whatever that date's called there.
The date.
The date,
Operational date.
the date that they have to start being a school district.
Yeah,
on their own.
Operational.
This is the other operational date. We want it to be in 2024 instead of 2023. It gives them a whole other year.
Yeah, I guess the one thing I would say, excuse me, I guzzled soda and that's really a bad idea right before you're trying to talk.
We do have a number of different, we probably have antacids on this table, to be honest with you.
We have
Burp
peppermint
on
life
Zoom.
Right, right.
Anyway,
Promise.
you have like a whole, it's amazing.
I got a scripture last week.
Wow. What I was gonna say to all of this is that, like I said, I represent all the towns, including the other towns, and the school districts themselves, ACSD and Mount Abe. I did check in with them last week before this all came to pass, but I have not had the chance to check in with them now about this particular proposal. So that is one consideration is, will those school districts, is the delay okay for them? Because I think right now they're, at least ACSD, I think is, planning for moving forward, whether or not Ripton's going to be there. And, do they have to have a principal and do they have to have staffing up there? And so that is certainly an issue. That being said, when I did speak with the superintendent, he seemed like pretty flexible about it. They are a really small school in the district, so it's less of an issue, but I do want to say that could be an issue, either of those, yours or the way it is structured now. But I think your proposal does make it easier administratively, and I would be totally happy with that. The one other thing I forgot that's in the amendment that Beth can explain more is that there was an inconsistency in the original, in the bill as you guys passed it out. I think it was for Ripton, the board had to get back to them by August 1st. And for Lincoln, they had to get back to them by September 1st. And it didn't seem, I didn't know why there was a difference. So I think in this proposal, it just makes them the same.
Yeah.
Makes them both September. But yeah, I like your idea, Senator Perchlik.
Yeah, Senator Hardy, first of all, thank you for coming in. This is really helpful.
Sure.
And
This is more fun than finance.
Oh,
A lot of
I'm
people
gonna
say-
tell your chair.
Well, it's live on YouTube. So
I'll tell you, it's all fun and giggles when Senator Hardy's here. I mean, this committee completely, everybody lightens up. It's,
I miss
So-
this room.
I think, and I know you share our concern here. We just don't want students to go through a period of being poorly served. And
Yeah.
that's why we are putting in the guardrails that we have put in, after what we've heard from a range of people, a range of testimony. So
Yeah,
I know you and I have talked about this. You
Yep.
certainly, without a doubt, share that throughout the state. We want students served as well as they possibly can be.
yeah.
So that was our. as you
I
know.
totally understand that. And I mean, I do think it seems like iffy when there's just one little tiny district out on its own. I feel a little bit more comfortable with all three of them together. But I share your concerns and, trying to reach a place where I feel comfortable for all of my constituents
Sure.
and most especially for the kids in the school.
So Harry, would you remind me how many students are in Ripton in the school?
It's around 50.
Okay,
It fluctuates
75,
between
so,
40 and 60.
okay.
But yeah, they're a very tiny school and that's pre-K through now 5. So I think it's actually under 50 because 6th graders were moved to the middle school this year. So it's probably 45-ish.
Ms. Russo Savage, I don't know if Senator Hardy can stay. Donna sometimes can't be on the video. Oh, there she is.
We'll see. We'll see.
We'll see.
Hi, Donna.
Hey.
Great to see you. thanks for your continued assistance on this. You've just heard Senator Hardy's proposal slash Senator Perchlik's proposal. Can you give us some feedback on this idea, on this amendment, and how we might work with it, or does it not? Is it unworkable?
Well, this is the first that I've heard of it. I haven't read it yet,
Sure.
and this is the first that
Okay.
I've heard of it. I haven't been able to speak with the secretary or general counsel, obviously, because this is the first I've heard of it. So I don't know, from a policy position, what anyone
Okay.
thinks about it. And the same thing, I haven't been able to speak with the chair of the state board. Just purely as a practical matter, I don't see that putting it out a year as a practical matter for the work that we would need to do would change anything. And I
Okay.
do think that, except that it would be twice the work because we would be doing the analysis on two separate occasions. And then Senator Perchlik's suggestion is something to think about. If we're going to be going through this level of analysis this year, and then need to go through it all again next year, and the timeline for this year is extremely brief to be reviewing it all. Perhaps if you were to push it off for a year, as he suggests, if you were to include some sort of a check-in in between, just so that the state board or the secretary, whoever is looking at it, would know that, or just for the you wouldn't even have to put a date, just put the possibility that we could check in with them. Then it wouldn't be a total surprise that we would have to respond to in a month, the way that it is now. These are just really very quick thoughts. I'm sorry.
No, this is very helpful. I just, honestly, for me, it was the practicality piece, whether or not this would be practical. And I think what Senator Perchlik is advocating for, or his idea, is okay with Senator Hardy. I think that does make the most sense, so that people aren't perhaps not duplicating work, but analyzing twice.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, and I think a check-in makes sense, and I think there was language, I'm sorry, I have not read the whole thing because I just got it, but that I had asked Beth about language for having some kind of public check-ins to make sure the public is in the loop on what's going on. And certainly, I think the ability for the state board to check in makes sense too. And
Senator Lyons.
So we had a public connect, but it was for the AOE.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was your idea.
yeah, and I, would love to get this to some place where you all feel comfortable with it. But even if that doesn't happen, I still would like to take it up on the floor, just doing my
Sure.
due diligence for my
Absolutely.
constituents. But
Does anybody have questions for Senator Hardy, or have concerns? Is it raising any concerns at this point? I mean, we'll still hear from, Donald,
Yeah.
the agency, but I
Do
just
what you
wanted
need to do.
Ms. Russo Savage to just check in with the practicality of it. And it seems like the way Senator Perchlik was moving it could make good sense overall.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And if Beth is able to redraft it and whatever, that would be great. I'm happy to stay as long as you want, but I would love to hang out and eat with you guys and, chill, dance, whatever. But I should go back to finance unless you need me here still. So Senator Probst
There you
wants
go.
me.
Senator Hardy,
So,
thanks for coming
You're
in.
welcome. Just let me know what you decided and what we're gonna do.
Okay,
All right,
Thanks.
thanks, everybody.
thank you. Ms. Russo Savage, you look like you're ready to say something, but if not, we can go right to Ms. St. James. And Ms. St. James, you heard Senator Perchlik's idea, I believe.
Yeah.
And is that something that you might have, was that easy drafting, or is that hard drafting? I'm wondering if we could see that in 45 minutes. Is that possible?
I can certainly try. It would not be edited, and I unfortunately need to leave today in about an hour.
Sure.
So, but I do, before we go any further, I have some,
Yeah.
I don't know that they're questions, but just points of clarification so that everyone's on the same page. So the first one is, and I'm sorry that Senator Hardy left, but I didn't get explicit permission to ask Daphne to post that amendment, but Donna has not seen it. So it would,
Email that to Donna.
Yeah, I just got permission.
But if we're gonna have a new one, but at least you can see this.
right.
Yeah.
So for Ripton, it's relatively straightforward because there has already been a withdrawal approved.
Mhm.
So my question regarding Ripton would just be, who do you want to be, or who should be the trigger for the request to the state board to delay everything a year? Is that a vote of the school district, or is that a vote just of the school board?
I was thinking the school board would make that determination. They'd say, they would have the three options: the off-ramp, the report on preparedness, or the year delay.
Okay, so maybe I didn't understand what you were asking for. So the three options would be they move forward with withdrawal and they ask for the state board to weigh in July 2022. Is that option
Right.
one? Okay.
Yeah, that as passed out of the committee.
Right.
Right. That's right.
Right. And then option two, you want me to build back in the off ramp so that if they
Well,
choose
I guess option two I thought was already there. The off ramp I thought was built in.
They could always do that, I believe, right?
Yeah. Oh, no.
no, there's no off ramp now in the Senate version. The off ramp only exists in the House version.
Oh, I thought there was there an off ramp at the end?
No.
No. Okay. Well, so they only have two options. I mean, I don't know if they would take it at this point, but I guess I just thought it was in there somewhere. But the third option, or the second option, if the off ramp is closed for construction, is they say that they're not going to do the report on preparedness to withdraw, that they're or preparedness to operate, and that they would not requesting, but saying that taking the option of a 1-year delay, moving that the same process that they would do now, and the bill is passed through the committee, but they would just do it in 23 instead of 22. But I liked Donna's suggestion of a check-in, things like that, so that there's a little more time for the board and agency to respond and do the analysis next year.
Sure. So what I'm hearing for Ripton would be, or section 4 would be, the school board would vote whether to move forward with a review by the State Board of Education in July of 2022 on their preparedness and live with that decision.
Yeah.
Or they could request, or they could ask for or they could push out their operational date a year and then ask for a review by the State Board of Education in July of 2023 with the ability to check in with the State Board of Education in the interim.
The state board has the ability to check in with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it would be good if the state board knew in March or as soon as they could that they are going to go forward with the proposal in July. So it's not just July shows up and they have to do all that analysis.
You mean July of 2023?
Yeah.
Sure, I can add something that says that at the first, if they were to decide not to, the problem with Ripton is withdrawal has already been approved. So if you don't build in a mechanism for them to ask for, to undo the withdrawal, then there's no way for them to do that other than either asking to rejoin the supervisory union or the school district that they were a part of, or forming a new school district under the new laws that would be in effect if this passes.
Is that too much to ask to put the withdrawal in there?
To be honest, I don't know why. You mean the off ramp? why we wouldn't have the off-ramp in there personally. And I was under the impression also that there, and I guess maybe I just thought that maybe that if the language wasn't in there, that people could use an off-ramp in some way. So I think it makes sense to have an off-ramp personally. I mean, we want to encourage good decision-making. We don't want to force people. We want them to be able to have an on-ramp or an off-ramp.
Where would the off-ramp occur? Where would they take where would the decision points for the off-ramp be?
Both this summer and next summer.
Okay.
Like, well, this summer, if they don't take the off-ramp, they have the two other options, the year delay or go through the process and see if they can get the withdrawal finalized. If they do the year delay, then next year in 23, they would have the off-ramp or the report on preparedness, or the status report, we're calling it.
And then the off-ramp in the second part, so I'm sorry, can I repeat that back to you?
Please.
So for July of 2022, they either vote to go forward with the moving towards the operational date, which would require the State Board of Education review.
Yeah.
And if the State Board of Education says, I'm sorry, I understand you think you're ready, but we don't,
Right.
that means that it's game over.
Yeah.
The state board would say, we are undoing the withdrawal process.
Yep.
If they decide that they don't want to go forward in July of 2022, they could also, with the State Board of Education review, they could have two options. It would be either to take the off-ramp because they see the writing on the wall and they know they don't even want to ask for a review, or they don't even want to postpone it a year. They just know withdrawal is not going to be an option.
Right.
The off-ramp would be built in there.
Yep.
Or they could say, we don't think we're going to make it happen in 2022. So we would like to have a review in 2023. Right?
Buying them more time. Yep.
Right. So there's three options in 2022. And then between 2022 and 2023, if they're looking for a review there, they can march towards that review with a check-in in the middle there. Or they could take the off-ramp in the middle there. Is that what you're thinking?
Well, I guess maybe they could take it at any time, but I figured they would take it before they have to decide on the status report in summer of 2023. So that status report is due, let's say it's due in July, like it is in 22. They would say in June, you know what, we're not going to do the report on July 1st. We're taking the off-ramp and we'll have the vote.
So would it be easier to just say they have the opportunity to take the off-ramp at any time before their operational date?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Why not, right?
So this is really complex because none of the off-ramp is built into the Senate proposal. So this is not something I could do easily this afternoon. It would require more, I think, more time, even if I didn't have to duck out of here at 3:30.
Because if it's in the House version.
It's in the House version. Yeah, let's forget the off ramps. Let's try to keep this closer to what Senator Hardy proposed. Senator Pursley proposed without the off ramps. Does that make sense to everyone, given the timing and the complexity now? Okay.
So, yep. I'm so sorry, but I still won't have anything for you in the next half hour.
Okay.
So if we're taking the off-ramp out, it is just that the school board is voting in sometime between now and July of 2022, whether to move forward with the review now or push out the operational date and move forward in 2023. Is that accurate? Okay.
Yep.
No off-ramp. And then there's a check-in built in if they're moving towards 2023.
Yeah.
Okay. Lincoln is even more complicated because there's no school board to do any of this. So the draft that Senator Hardy's amendment, the way I drafted it is that in 2022, so for section 3 in section it's the second instance of amendment, and it starts on page.
7 and 8.
Sorry, these are hard to find. Page 7. The state board would vote to approve withdrawal at the same time as issuing an initial advisory, an initial preparedness opinion, because without approving that withdrawal and creating that new school district, there would be no voters to elect a new school board and no school board to actually, no school district for there to be a school board. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Is that what you would like me to build into this, the kind of committee amendment that we're looking at?
Does the state, is the state board under the same kind of situation they were with Ripton, where they were kind of had to accept the withdrawal?
So for Ripton, the withdrawal proposal already happened, or the withdrawal approval already happened prior to you taking this bill up. And the current law says that the state board, after the voters say we want to withdraw, the state board has to approve it if they find that the students will attend a school that meets the state board rules, essentially educational quality standards. So they didn't, the state board didn't technically have to approve it. They just, the bar is low for the finding that they have to make.
That would be the situation for Lincoln.
So the way this has been drafted is,
just no, not the way that this amendment, but just the way it is as the bill passed out of the committee. Like Lincoln already had their vote, so they're just waiting to hear back from the board. The board just would be the same rubric as before the bill. They would just have to meet, are the students going to the school meeting the quality standards? They have a bigger.
Yes. So as passed out of committee, Lincoln would have to give a report to the state board in July of 2022, outlining all of the information that is required, and then a plan for preparedness. And then the state board has to make a determination if they are likely, it's likely on the proposed date that they will be able to assume full responsibility for their education in a manner that substantially complies with educational quality standards, which is similar. It's not the same wording, but it's similar to current law, but also, and that it is also likely supervisory union services will be available to the proposed new school district. That's not required under current law.
And this was the self-selected representatives of the town. So
correct. Before the state board, before the state board approves withdrawal, it's just the self-selected petitioners doing this.
They have to write the report.
Yes.
Submitting the report.
Right. In the real world, I mean, they could, if there's private funds behind this, they could contract with someone, but yes, it would be the self-selected individuals would be as kind of specific as we could get in law, because there's no body politic.
Can we just say that same self-selected representatives could decide to vote to do the postponement for a year? Or is that weird because they're just a self-selecting group of people?
You could. I would suggest you hear from Donna on this for real, like real world limitations she has seen in her position that I am just not privy to. You could allow them to do that, but they would, they're not. They are, there would be an argument to be made about, are their meetings have to be open to the public and subject to open meeting laws? How transparent would the process be, just because they're not a designated entity? They're just 3 people. I think it's 3 people. Actually, I'm not even sure we mentioned, I think it's just a self-selected. it could get trickier, and it could get trickier because they're not a defined group anywhere. It's just a group that presumably it's just a group that has been working on this issue thus far.
Yeah, not elected. It sounds a little sketchy, actually. No, you know what I mean? It just sounds like people would feel better if it were an elected body that was making this kind of decision.
They're the ones having to do the report to give to the board.
Right. They are the ones who have to do the report to give to the board because there's no one else to do it.
So can't they just say, hey, that report that we owe you in July, we're going to give it to you in July of 2023?
You could, that is, yes, you could do that. The report then would still be just a report on ideas. There wouldn't be really, so what Section 6 does in the Senate version that passed out of your committee is, let's see. Well, I guess it would be the House version. Anyway, the part of what they're, I think what the state board would want to see before giving that, well, I guess it's really up to you in a policy consideration. You may only, the state board may only get, if it's just the self-selected representative, they may only get a plan. They may not get a budget. They may not get all of the things that are required for the operational date if it's just the self-selected entity, unless you, the negotiation of the financial terms, a report on that between the union district and the new school district, a vote on the proposed financial terms. All of that would have to happen before the operational date. And if you want the state board to be looking at whether they are likely to be operational, at some point, it seems to make sense for there to be either a decision that they just can't go any further, or that a new school district has to be created to give them a shot. But I think it's a policy decision on when that decision's made. If you're going to give the self-selected representatives another year, so out to July 2023, I still don't think that would get the state board any of the terms that, let's say, Lincoln would be giving them, because Lincoln has done all of that work. The state board would still, in July 2023, likely just have a report on, let's see, what are they required to do? Basically, it's the withdrawal analysis that would be required in Section 3. I don't know if you want to hear from Donna on whether she disagrees with me on any of that and could make your lives easier.
Donna, what do you think this is? You've been following this conversation.
I'm not exactly sure that I understand quite where the conversation has landed. And if we're talking about Lincoln, then if you push everything off for a year, then Beth is right. They'll be in the same position next summer that they're in now, except that the self-selected people will have an extra year to continue planning for the future. They have represented that they are planning and that they are getting their ducks in a row and that they are going to be ready to move forward in 2023. So all of this would be pushing it off until 2024. Yeah, the same kinds of awkward, yeah. I think one of the first things is whether to give a self-selected group of people the ability to push it off or not is, it is one of the first policy things, or whether it's something that you all, I don't know.
But we're hearing that they are going, I mean, Lincoln, I don't know if Lincoln proposed this to Senator Hardy or not, but it sounds like they will be ready by 2023, or at least they're saying they're going to be ready by 2023.
Okay.
Or that they might want to do the 3-town proposal of a new.
Of a new super, yeah.
I mean, right now, we're saying that this just select committee, self-appointed group will do this big report, issue that to the SBE, and the SBE could say, no, it's not good, and it would be over. And that's what we said. This would just say, okay, instead of going through that process, we want to go through that process next year.
So you would just be moving all of the dates out by a year and assuming that it's a 2024 operational date.
Basically, and with the only caveat is that they would have a choice. If they feel confident, like, hey, no, let's submit our plan. And but if they submit the plan and the SB says no, then it's over. So they might just say, well, let's take the option of a year. Let's see what the vote is in Starksboro. Let's talk to Ripton. Let's see if we can form somehow together a functioning supervisory union to supply the services that they need, that we've heard they have difficulty getting without forming a new one.
Just pushing it all out.
Right, which means that this, right, I don't see a practical issue. It's more of a, do you want to continue to have a self-selected group doing the planning for another year? But the timing as far as getting up and running wouldn't be any different. Exactly.
Okay. You're all right with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like the committee's okay with that, Ms. St. James.
Okay, and then
basically, generally, and this may have to happen before third reading, but I prefer it to happen before second reading. Giving people more time is the general theme of this. Just giving them some extra space, extra time to come to the good decisions, to collaborate, to make new supervisory whatever they're wanting to do.
okay. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page, though, that for Lincoln, if they choose to not do the report in July of 2022 and then instead to do it in July of 2023, if we stick with the Senate version, that would mean that in July of 2023, the state board would be voting on whether to approve withdrawal or end the withdrawal process altogether, and then they would have to go back to go and not collect $200 if in 2023 the state board says you're all done. They'd have to start all over again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just like Ripton's.
Right.
Well, Ripton is already done. So yes, they would have to start all over again, but yes.
They both have to go back to go, but they would be going back to go from different positions.
Yeah.
Time pressures.
Okay.
Do you want, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just, I didn't know if we needed to change anything in Starksboro section. So.
This only gave them a 90-day extension to get their thing together.
I don't know why 90 days came up. I mean, that seems like a lot. I could live with 60, but what do you think, Donna?
Yeah, well, may I just, in response to that specific question, they have essentially, if you play out the dates, they have essentially 6 months because they have from now until the end of the 30 or 60 day period, whatever it was already. So it really is up to you how much more time you want to give them. But may I just ask, are you pushing all of their elements off for a year as well? Or how is that? I guess maybe not, because they already wouldn't have been ready before 2024 anyway.
That was the proposal that we have before us in terms of Starksboro.
Okay.
I'm sorry, was that I did not hear it. There have been no changes to, there have been no changes to the Starksboro section other than that 30 to 90 day change. The process was not changed at all in Senator Hardy's amendment.
Okay.
So as it stands now, the Senate version of section 7, which relates to Starksboro, would be different than Lincoln or Ripton. Do you want me to align Starksboro with Lincoln?
Yeah, I wonder if it's just, I think so, just so if they're gonna all three come together, they would wanna all come in together in 2023. I mean, there's the chance that they have the vote in May 10th or whenever it is, and they vote no, then none of it matters. But if they vote yes, they still have to have the vote of the other towns. They haven't done that yet. So I don't know, I guess, I don't, since we just had 90 days and things like 30 days, I don't know where that takes them to when they have to issue their plan to the board. But maybe we do push that back to where they're, if they vote yes and the other towns vote yes, their report and plan to the board can be pushed back to June of 2023. Unless they want to do it earlier, I guess. You know what I mean? To align, if they want to wait and align with Ripton and Lincoln, they could do that. But if they're like, oh, we're not going to work with them, we just want to go ahead as on our own.
So you'd like to give Starksboro the choice to within 30 days as drafted or 90 days as a proposed amendment of the ratification vote. They could either ask for the state board review at that point, knowing that they have to live with that decision, or they could ask for state board review in July of 2023, along with Ripton and Lincoln. Is that accurate?
That's what I was thinking, yes.
Okay. Okay. Is that what you'd like me to draft for tomorrow?
Please. Please.
Okay. And would you like this as a, since you don't have jurisdiction of the bill anymore, who would you like the amendment to come from?
Well, it's Senator Hardy's amendment, but I think if senators want to sign on, but I think we'd rather have a look-see before we start throwing our names out there.
Okay.
I'm guessing, unless people are ready to jump on.
No, I mean, I think it makes sense to say Hardy and other senators maybe, then we can see what it's like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it's good, we'll sign on. If it's not, forget it.
Let's do this, because why don't I prepare an amendment for the members of Senate Education aligned with what I've talked about, and then with your permission, I can share that with Senator Hardy.
Okay. You have our permission.
Okay, thank you. And then you all can give me further direction on whose name is on what amendment, in case Senator Hardy wants to keep her amendment as is, or there's still not a perfect meeting of the mind.
Yeah, my hope is that Senator Hardy is going to be moving toward our direction, and that this might be a kind of a kumbaya moment. And so that's kind of why we're going through this work. I'm happy to talk with her a little bit about that as well.
And then lastly, if I'm drafting an amendment for you that may become an amendment for other people, at this point, would you be comfortable with me sharing with Donna?
Absolutely.
Okay,
yeah, share whatever you'd like with Donna.
Okay. Then I can get drafting, and we'll get a copy. I'll email it to the committee as soon as, do you want it before or after it goes to editing?
Before, please.
Sure.
So we will try to, I'm just thinking committee aloud, happy to certainly welcome anyone's advice. We can go forward with 727 tomorrow, letting senators know that this is on its way, or we can, since it isn't too much of an
Not an upheaval of the bill.
what's that?
It's not a real upheaval.
It's not an upheaval of the bill. And if timing were to work out, we can always do it tomorrow. I'm looking to Senator Person who's working on those sections. What do you feel most comfortable doing?
I think it's a good idea to get it through second reading, unless you think we're going to suspend rules and do all. So
we'll push for tomorrow?
Yeah, do second reading.
Okay, we'll try to push for tomorrow, and then we have, so, the committee would have to see the amendment, and then the committee would have to, vote on it before 10 a.m. We'll try to gather for 15 minutes sometime tomorrow morning. Or we, or.
Are we on the
I meant
floor?
the bill, do the bill
Are we on the
tomorrow.
floor at 10?
Oh,
I don't
fine.
care if the
Yeah.
amendment's third reading
Okay,
or
we'll
second
have
reading.
Oh, you don't, okay.
Yeah, no, third reading for the amendment's fine. I just wanted to
Yeah.
make sure we did the bill.
8:40.
That's our plan. Our plan is to do the bill tomorrow. If we can get the amendment ready to roll, great. If not, we'll do it before third reading.
Okay, I will have an amendment for you as soon as it's done drafting.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. St. James? Okay, we'll look for that. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Daphne, will you take us offline? We're just gonna take a 5-minute break.